All right, all right. Bless up, family, and welcome to another episode of Constructive Convos, where we bring the conversation back to black. Today we have a wonderful topic, and we're going to honor one of our ancestors, the elder Dr. Amos Wilson, and we're going to talk about the blueprint to Black Power. So let the family. I'm going to introduce the family we have here. We have our brother B2, brother E, sister Fatima, brother Shakarai, brother Witness, and I am Melanated Goddess. Everyone, greetings to the family.
Peace.
Peace.
Blessings, family. Big up blessings.
We have had a lot of discussion about this topic in the background, preparing. Everyone's been reading and even watching the video and taking notes and so forth. And I believe we're going to start off with showing a small clip of the video of the lecture that Dr. Amos Wilson gave. Is the clip ready, Brother Witness?
Yes, it is. I'm going to share my screen for all of you now.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I'm going to start praying.
Blessings, Sister Christy. Thank you for joining us.
I'm often somewhat amused and taken aback by the number of people in this society who claim that slavery occurred somewhere back there. And you got some so-called black conservatives who claim that slavery no longer influences the nature of African people. I wonder what those people have to conserve in the first place. Are they conserving power? They're conserving wealth? What does a black conservative conserve? You know, you have to conserve something. And since they have very little, if anything, they must only be conserving the system that has created their poverty to begin with. And you see them ultimately justifying the poverty of African people and justifying the political and social and economic subordination of African people in the name of some kind of higher principles. So slavery is not supposed, the experience of slavery is not supposed to be operating in the mentality of black folk. You hear a lot of our youngsters will say that as well. How do you talk about slavery? That was back there. Or you whites talk about, well, you know, that was back there. We don't have anything to do with that anymore. You see. And it's an amazing situation because you have to remind them that you're still living off the interest of the wealth that your forefathers earned from slavery. You are still enjoying the accumulated wealth that began with the enslavement of our people. And if you're going to enjoy the wealth that was generated by evil, then you must take the curse that comes along with it. And therefore, even though you personally had nothing to do with it, but because you have received stolen goods, you must pay the price as well. And because you fight and struggle to protect those stolen goods, and you defend them, and you organize your society and your relationship to my people to maintain them and to continue to enhance them, then you must pay the price. That's why you live in terror. That's why you're stabbed in these streets. That's why you're going to suffer, no matter how good you are, no matter how liberal you are. Ladies and gentlemen, when we behave as adults, we must recognize that our behavior will be visited upon our children, and that our children pay for our misbehavior. As we say, an act does not end at the point of its occurrence. It continues to reverberate into the future and down across the generations. And that's why when you behave in a particular way, you have to think in terms of 7 generations from your behavior as to how what you're going to do is going to affect those generations later on. And even though those children may appear to be so-called innocent, they will still pay the price of your own misbehavior. This country, whose parents and whose adults have misspent its treasure, and while they have enjoyed that treasure, ultimately their children will have to pay the taxes and will have to pay the price. So we have a bunch of people out here who think they can rape and rob the world and think that they could have enslaved the world and think then that they are going to sleep well at night. It doesn't work that way. So we have some of our people here who think then that slavery was back then and had nothing to do. It had nothing to do with them. Ladies and gentlemen, we've never escaped slavery. We still share the slave consciousness of our great-great-grandparents. We are of the same mind to a great extent that they were. We have not advanced beyond these people. How can I say that? I generally ask a series of questions. You say that slavery has nothing to do with you and slavery was back there. And I ask you the question then, what language do you speak? Mm-hmm. When did you learn that language? Was that the language African people were speaking when we were taken into slavery in America? In other words, the language we speak at this moment is what? A slave language. The language that our slave ancestors were forced to learn. And we still speak it, and you can still hear the pidgin, the Creole, and the other kinds of stuff in our language right at this moment that they had to go through. That language, with its words defined by history and by an experience, is the language we use today to guide our behavior. It's the language we use today to talk to ourselves. It's the language we use today to learn about ourselves and to learn about the world. It's the language today we use to try to understand ourselves. Is there no wonder then that we are still confused? So we have not escaped slavery because we are still using a slave language and we speak the language of slaves.
You want to hear some more? Hello?
I think we can stop it there. What you guys think?
Yeah.
That's a good place to stop.
All right, then I'll stop there.
So, family, what's your feedback? What are your thoughts on what Dr. Amos Wilson had to say?
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, the whole, if you listen to the whole lecture, like he goes in to talk about obviously the possession and exactly why the word possession or the idea behind possession applies to the current state of the black people. I find it interesting. I feel he's accurate on a lot of things. And yeah. I mean, as far as what you just said there, I think that was just kind of introducing the convo. It gets to the meaty parts after, but yeah, that's for me. Yeah, man's feeling what he's saying still, and I'm in agreement with a lot of what he's saying still.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. I didn't get to see how far he got up into the lecture, but yeah, at the beginning, it's talking about mindset and stuff like that, right? So it's kind of just building up to a lot of the possession stuff. But I definitely agree with a lot of what he's saying, and I like the way, yeah, he transitions into it, like by starting with some misconceptions we have, and then dealing with the actual root cause of the problem, which is the possession.
Yeah, I think it was a really good play on words to talk about basically, because we still have these remnants, the the leftover, the residue from slavery, and pretty much, as he said, we were given a language and pretty much groomed to be a certain type of way that basically in the process our minds were possessed by the oppressor, and they have given us a mind that has a function to suit their best interests. And I mean, like, just the way that he definitely said it way more eloquently than I just did, but I was like, I couldn't help but just agree with, when you look at, how the mind that many blacks have is to, fulfill the needs and the desires and cater to the dominant race or the white race. Yeah, you know, that's why we need to
Like
echo
when you
that.
use the word possession, like to me, like as soon as I thought about what you're saying, it brought so much clarity, like about us not really being ourselves. And a lot of that comes from, not knowing who we are through, history being blurred. And a lot of it is, through policy. And definitely with the possession, if we look at like all the different areas where we could say we're not being ourselves with the things that we like or that we now think that we like, that some time ago we would never have been interested in, and not even like the stuff that we promote as prestige is really not our stuff, isn't it? Like if you look at clothing, or most of the brands and the labels, they're like Italian or French or whatever. The same with how we drive, same with how we date, the same with how we eat. Like all of these are more based on how Europeans move than necessarily we would have moved before we.
Right, but I think there'd be a group of people to kind of disagree that that's European, and I feel like that's because that's all that that we know. You know what I mean? Like, that's all that we know for so long, that knowing that you knew something else is erased. Like, I think I went when he was talking about, like, the way that we dress. When I wear something that's considered to be like African attire, the way in which other black people act is if, like, you're doing like the most, like what I'm saying, they respond like,
Yeah.
whoa, that is nice, or you look, wow, I mean, where did you get that from? And like, they just go overboard, and it's like, I wish I could dress like this every day. You know what I mean? Like, I wish, this is better than Gucci. This is better than all these other little, name brands that we wear. This is better than Donna Karen. This dress right here is better than Donna Karen dress.
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, it's funny, yeah, because do you think that now, because the trend is changing a little bit here, especially like in the UK, yeah, in terms of dressing and stuff like that. But do you think that's a part of us like waking up, or is a part of the quote unquote dominant society being more accepting of these things?
It's a bit of both.
What'd you say, Blake?
It's a bit of both. Somebody's echoing. I'm not sure who or what, but yeah, it's a bit. I'd say it's a bit of both. I think there's an extent to which this idea of multiculturalism has allowed some of us to feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying? Wearing, you know, traditional attire, or, you know what I'm saying, them kind of things there. But I also think that but that all of that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for certain ones of us who were, you know, kind of on that before it became fashionable or popular or acceptable. You know what I'm saying? So in a sense, they're responding to what we put out there, but because they have a system of control, it's like they're co-opting it at the same time. And then some of us are coming in and responding to their co-option rather than to those who are proactively dealing with it from before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, because even with, like, I suppose, not just the clothing in it, I think with the culture in general, it's become a lot more acceptable to most people, and much more, I suppose, palatable, for the want of a better word. Like, even with the music now, it's like you see loads of people that are not necessarily promoting or so into African culture that are now called Afro beats, where before they would have been like, nah, take it off.
Nice. And this is the thing where all them things are concerned, yeah. Because I feel like the essence, like the deeper aspect of the spirit possession, is that like you'll promote the ideals of white supremacy using your own culture. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like you keep the form, but you lose the essence in it. You know what I mean? And it's a thing where, so if you know all of our musics now, I think somebody was saying before, in terms of all the things that we glorify is them in it, like Gucci and whatever. So our music is beautiful. It comes from us in it. We created it, but we will use it to promote Gucci. You know what I'm saying? And these kinds of things. So it's like the spirit of possession manifests even in the best of ourselves. We're trying to be ourselves, culturally speaking, artistically speaking. And I think that's a similar thing, even where with the popularization of Afro beats right about now. I've watched that progression proper hard for quite some time in it, and I'm saying that when it starts popping is when a lot of the artists them are wearing European name brands in the videos, and you know what I mean. You know, all the videos start to look like they're, you know, in Miami and New York, Manhattan, and you know what I'm saying. Those kind of things there. It's like it's the same principles that we're reinforcing. So it's a far cry from Fela Kuti and, you know what I'm saying. You know, the people that are considered to be the founders of the team. Yeah. But the music is still beautiful, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's mad.
It's interesting, even like that we mentioned music, because in his lecture he goes on to say, like, when he's talking about even things like culture and nationhood, he talks about the need for diversities in a nation, in a group of people, because by all being one, I think he uses he even goes on to use like some analogy of like in an apocalyptic scenario where a virus wipes out everyone, there may be a few to remain because they're not made, like genetically they're not exactly the same, but had they all been exactly the same, then the whole species would be annihilated in one hit. Whereas where there is diversity, you've got the opportunity. So it's like when he's talking about the nation building and that, he's saying there is a need for the diversity because the diversity serves the group. Do you get me? And the music thing, it's used to tap into us and sort of attach this spirit on us, because it encourages, it's rhythmic, It's asking for its listeners to be moving in coordination, and these things lend themselves well to sort of manipulating and influencing a wide group of people. You know, if you can tap into their music, their ways of expression, and even talks about how eventually we start to advocate for this spirit and defending it as if ourselves and the spirit are one in the same. So when someone starts to attack the spirit, oh yeah, I liked the music and that, but yeah, why was you wearing Gucci? Man, now is gonna go and defend the spirit, like because they're seeing it, they're perceiving it to be a personal attack to them. So yeah, man, it's lots of themes in it. For me, particularly, the issue, like particular points of interest, was when he was talking about culture, because even the way he was talking about culture was in a way that it's constantly fluid, it's constantly being updated. It's not a single constant, and it can't be, because it needs to be dynamic to its surroundings. Do you know what I mean? And again, with the diversities of the group, the importance of that, and also something you said, Shakara, how in the Black community, certain times we're more reactive. We're only reacting this way because some next external forces encouraged us to, or maybe Black Panther got released and it's the popping thing right now, or Afro beats is or we're angry at the oppressors because, yeah, man. So I don't know. He spoke a lot about sort of going back to a base African sort of culture, and not being reactive necessarily to that is happening to that is being done by those who are sort of continuously oppressing us. Things will change once we exercise that spirit out. You know what I mean? But for as long as we're not exercising that spirit out, really we're hating ourselves and protecting the spirit. So it means that we're gonna go and kill or hate the mirror reflection of ourselves, as opposed to going to the source and addressing the source of the problems, which is the spirit.
Yeah, like on the music thing, yeah, I just want to read out something that is from the transcript, yeah. So it says, we tend to see culture in terms of music, in terms of kinds of dance, the dance we have, in terms of the songs we sing, and that is part of culture. But ultimately, culture is deeper than that. Culture is a way of thinking. Ultimately, culture is a conspiracy that is, it is a means by which a group of people organize the way they think, organize the way they believe, organize the way they see the world, so as to create a consciousness by which they can cooperate in achieving certain ends, so that they can mutually aid each other and gain ends that they cannot gain as separate individuals. So culture is an instrument of power. The individual through culture extends his power, and the culture extends the power of the group. When we talk about music and song and dance, what we are talking about then here is how culture ultimately comes to be implanted in our bodies. You see, we tend to look at song and dance as music and entertainment, and this is a serious mistake. We have a lot of our youth out there looking at music as mere entertainment. What we say, when we say that we have been encultured, it means that spirit has been implanted in us. By the culture, it means groups that are instilling in our bodies and in our minds a possessing spirit, so that when our culture calls
Brother E? E, can't hear you.
Can't tell from man.
Okay. Think his call dropped or something.
Okay, oh, he's back. Okay, no, he's gone.
Are you back, Brother E? Okay, well, I'll just say what I was going to say before he started reading. I think that the very fact is what Dr. Amos Wilson, what he was saying about like important parts of culture. I want to say, I remember him saying something to the fact of like the consciousness, the culture and our consciousness being focused on being black, right? And the important parts of that would be that our best interest when it comes to employment, he talked a lot about like bringing up Black economy and just having your race first being your focal point in all of your transactions and all of your doing. Do it for your people, and in doing that you will be regaining your African consciousness. He was saying that the way in which we operate now um, is more out of like our slave consciousness, operating with the possessed mind that was given to us by the oppressor. And once the what is it called? Not the resurrection, not the resurrection. What is it called?
Exorcism.
The exorcism. Look, I said resurrection. Once the exorcism occurs, then we will have an African mind, and we will operate more from a community basis, dealing with our community and growing and building our community. And to me, that was like a big. I wish that like every person could just get that message. That it doesn't. He didn't speak any kind of like hate towards other people, but it was really like nailing home the emphasis that we have to do for ourselves, and we have to recognize what has happened to us, basically what has happened to our mind, our consciousness, and get that exorcism and get that African consciousness back. So yeah. But the part that you were reading on culture, I think is truly important as well. Like understanding that it's not just for you're just doing a little dance, you just twerking, you just doing like it's a lot more to music. It's a lot more than, oh, that's a dope beat, that's going on. And you could be kind of just being hypnotized and programmed to kind of, like Shakara said, further white supremacy. Just you giving a script and you out there on stage acting it out.
In other words, for those, I don't know, because I was disconnected for a while, because I noticed that we mentioned exorcism. And in order for those to understand what we mean when we say exorcism, Amos N. Wilson specified specifically that there are different types of possession. One of them is called somnambulistic possession. The other one is lucid possession. And the third one is latent possession. So I don't know if those have been discussed, but the somnambulistic possession basically has to do with sleepwalking. And basically what he's saying is that in this form of possession, somnambulistic possession, the individual's original self has been repressed and displaced. And he's basically identifying with the spirit that possesses him. Now that spirit is the supremacist spirit. And he says that, and in his eye and in the spirit's eye, they are one, and they have a lot in common. And that the spirit has implanted into us what it identifies as itself. And then you have other forms of possession, like I mentioned. You have lucid and latent. I mean, the funniest one is a latent possession, because when people have latent possession, it basically means when you are possessed and you don't even know it. So all the things that you are doing which are detrimental to yourself and to your people, you don't even realize that you're possessed by this spirit. In layman terms, the spirit being the supremacist system which has implanted itself into you spiritually. So everything you're doing which is negative to your people is basically from this spirit. So I'm assuming that this possession probably takes place from childhood. So because we now, this is me just guessing here, because we've all seen those videos when we see Black American little girls and two dolls are placed in front of them, one white, the other black, and then they're asked which one of those dolls is beautiful. And unfortunately, most of those young black girls point to the white doll and they ignore the black doll. So this form of possession is taking place from being very young. So it's not like you're possessed in your teens or in your mid-20s or your 30s. It's from childhood. So this possession, so that can explain why it's probably very hard for some of our people to realize that they are experiencing latent possession, not even knowing that they're possessed, because it's taking place from childhood. So
it's like people's new factory settings or something like that.
Yeah.
And even on the lucid one, the lucid possession, because that one there was about being possessed, but having an awareness, and it's an ongoing battle. And sometimes we don't do great on that battle, and other times we do. But he said that that would probably apply to most of us still. Recognizing that, yeah, there is this white supremacy. It is sort of trying to orchestrate our activities in a way that best serves the white communities and
Yes,
that are
yes,
detriment. Yeah.
yes. I think the word he used for it was Eurocentrically, and a Eurocentrically implanted demon is in us, as you mentioned. And we, in that form of possession, you realize that this Eurocentrically demon is implanted in you, and you are wrestling with it. As you mentioned, you're wrestling with it daily. And the sense that even though you're wrestling with it, it seems sometimes you're losing that battle against that demon which is inside you. But and you seem to be split with your personality, not fully understanding your identity, because you're constantly battling against this possession which is taking place, I guess, from your childhood.
He goes on though. I think when Witness was talking about the latent possession, where you realize that you're possessed, that the deeper level to it is when you begin to identify the demon possession spirit as yourself. You know what I'm saying? As this is who I am, this is who we you know what I mean? And we're doing, and I'm saying I feel like in the UK we're certainly getting to that point as we produce more generations over here. And the last World Cup was a prime example of that. In the sense of the amount of us that were carrying St. George's flag all over the place and supporting England and that kind of thing. And there are reasons for that, you know what I'm saying? I think coming back to what was asked of, I think what Melanie was saying, but in the sense of, because more of us are in the England team, we feel like we can identify ourselves with England more. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a mad science. You know what I mean? So in a sense, the demon kind of pulls us in to possess us even further. You know what I mean? It's a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? So and we're doing that willingly now. And I suppose I'm seeing that more again with this whole ADOS thing, in terms of this total acceptance of just, I'm an American.
Oh man, brother, I've seen some crazy videos. I went on YouTube and I typed in, "I'm not African." Oh my gosh, I felt so embarrassed. Like, it's like so many Black Americans saying the most ignorant things. Like, I don't speak African. I don't eat African food. I'm not. I mean, I don't never seen a tiger, never seen a lion. I was like, I don't live in no huts. This is what Black people are saying. Like, completely. What is that? Completely and totally. You know, they would probably tattoo an American flag right on their forehead. Like, I love this place, and I'm like, wow. Like, you don't watch the news on how you're treated here? Like, nope, just gonna completely ignore that part. You know, and they really, really seem to identify, even when the oppressor looks bad, right? Like another Black unarmed man gets shot. Well, he shouldn't have moved his hand. You know, he should have told him he had a cell phone. Why was he reaching for his cell phone? Like, like they making excuses for the wrong that's done, right? And always assuming bad in someone that looks like them. Always. It just broke my heart. Like, wow.
It's that self-hate. But check it though, yeah, now. So we've got the what's it called? The possession where a man don't even know that they're possessed, yeah. And then we got the possession where it's like sleepwalking, like Witness said, yeah. But then we got that middle possession where there is an awareness, but they're still possessed.
Lucid possession.
The lucid possession, yeah, where they're still possessed, but it's an ongoing battle. Yeah. Later on in his lecture, he goes on to say, he asks the crowd a question. He's like, oh, if I was to ask you, how many of you are in debt to either white individuals or major white-owned corporations? He said, I bet most of you will be able to raise your hand to that. But if I was to ask if you was in debt to black individuals or black owned organizations, it probably wouldn't have the same turnout. The point that I'm really trying to zoom into it, yeah, into here, is in terms of the lucid possession, in which ways are we still, where in which areas does the possession continue to go on? And as the lucid ones, you have some sort of awareness to it. Are we best placed to maybe spearhead the sort of raising of awareness or the change to facilitate that change? But also, I do think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation whereby we know where there's a degree of possession placed on us, but how easy is it for us to transition out of that, or how easy is it for us to completely exercise it? Because as far as Dr. Amos's question that I mentioned, right now, in a way, we're effectively supporting systems that aren't in our best interest, aren't paying back any dividends back to our community, ain't trying to invest in our community in any way. Do you know what I mean? Even the very fact that we're on a platform here that isn't owned by our community. Do you know what I'm saying? So these here are, again, examples of that possession, whereby credibility or the main platform to be on the main stage is the one that's been provided by, the oppressor. So how do we change these issues? What is obviously is to have ownership and create these platforms for ourselves, innit? But again, it's a bit like a chicken and egg situation.
It's a lot scarier. Yeah, it's a lot scarier than that, because the possession is so strong that Amos N. Wilson even goes on to say that we have to be careful, that the possession is so strong that even when we talk about our culture, black culture, we have to make sure that we're not talking about a reactionary culture. That basically that means a culture that has been generated by our reaction to the abuse we have suffered under the supremacy system. So we end up creating a culture as a byproduct of that exploitation, and we then call that culture we created our culture, black culture, when in fact it isn't really black culture. It's a reaction to the exploitation that we've experienced from the supremacy system. So that's really deep and scary. So you could be clinging onto something which really is not really your culture. It's just a byproduct. Scary. I mean, I can look at examples like when I look at certain things, like certain cuisine that's eaten in certain parts of the world, and the black people in that part of the world embrace that cuisine as being part of their culture. But then you look historically, that cuisine was created from their ancestors being exploited by the supremacy system. So they ended up creating that cuisine, and they now hold on to that cuisine with pride, when in fact that cuisine is a byproduct of the oppression they faced. So that is scary. But in regards to provision of solutions, there are a number of solutions he goes on to talk about. Talks a lot about African-centered belief system. He talks about nation building. And he says we have to look at ourselves and relate to ourselves as a nation of people, which is interesting. I mean, if I quote what he says, when we look at our relationship, we say to the Koreans as a nation, we see the same relationship that Japan has to America as a nation. You notice that they are bargaining right now, negotiating, right? Japan is building up its resources. It is blocking a U.S. industry from its nation. Yet it is entering into the American markets and selling there and taking out the wealth of the American markets. And then he goes on, where those groups can enter into the African-American nation, set up shop, ship out its wealth day by day and night by night. And yet this African-American entrepreneurial nation is not permitted to set up shop in their midst, is not permitted to carry wealth from their nations, and they then grow fat on the surface that they gain from the African-American nation. This means that if we think ourselves as a nation, we must protect our internal market from the intrusion of outsiders. We must not permit entry into our nation. So that was one thing he looks at as a solution, that we must organize and relate to ourselves as a nation of people. So we don't just say, well, I'm Nigerian, so I do my thing, or I'm Ghanaian and I do my thing. I guess we have to look at ourselves, I guess, internationally as a nation and try to help each other out. Which kind of goes back to that thing I said on whose show was it, either Shakara's show or Scattered Minds, when I mentioned that we have ECOWAS in West Africa, and then in the Caribbean they have CARICOM. So if ECOWAS, which is like a 15 member states, African states working together for economic trade, if they work with CARICOM, which is a combination of Caribbean countries working together for trade, they can then treat themselves as a nation and start implementing social and trade policies to benefit themselves as a nation. That's one way I look at it.
The thing of what you're saying, though, Witness, yeah, it kind of comes back to what you were saying before in terms of developing reactionary cultures.
Yeah.
I'm saying because in the sense that the reason why ECOWAS and CARICOM are not what they're supposed to be, they're not functioning, yeah, as they're supposed to, is because of the fact that they haven't exorcised the demon. The collective demon, because in a sense, what you're saying makes so much sense. And if they had exercised the demon, I would imagine it would be the natural way of relating. It would just be such a natural thing to do. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is that CARICOM is barely functioning in relation to itself. Do you see what I'm saying? CARICOM has been there in name for time, but it has barely functioned to do anything apart from cricket. What's it called? You know what I mean? That's just the reality. You see what I'm saying? So now, having said that, I have heard certain things, but you know, when you look at if you look at most of the nation states that make up CARICOM and ECOWAS, and then look at all of their individual relationships with the West, I think we'll find that their relationships with the West are stronger than their relationships with each other. You know what I'm saying? So that makes it impossible.
Strong. Damn.
Yeah.
Economic possession is that strong. That's scary.
It's that strong. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, man.
I think we overlooking the obvious of the possession to highlight how strong it is. What Dr. Amos Wilson said was the language. So in the West, we all speak in English. But you go on a continent and they speak in English, or they speak in French, or they speak in Portuguese. You have African people who, you know, you go there and you can be like, where's the store? Oh, the store's right there. They just talking English to you. You like, that's to show you where the mind is possessed. You know, you should go. When I went to Japan and I met Japanese people, and I'm like, how do you get to the mall? They speaking their language, looking at me like, what the hell? I don't care if you black. You in Japan, you need to get an app. You need to get something to be able to communicate with me. You see what I'm saying? They're like, you're in my country. You better speak what I'm saying. Like, you just got to come to my level. I'm not speaking your English. You're in Japan. So, but if I go to Nigeria, I can get around. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get a cab? Oh, you just go right here. I'll be able to communicate with people. That's to show you where the mind is. The mind, they got a Western mind. Because it's, you know, like we were talking earlier, and I really like the thing Brother E said, like, what language do you think in? You think in the same language that you speak.
Yeah.
So if you speak English, you're probably thinking in English.
Yeah.
So the way that you're describing yourself, the way that you encourage yourself, the way that you speak life into your future, all of that is from a Western perspective.
Yeah, man.
That's deep right there.
Yeah, you brought up something that I'm kind of my head is kind of there. Well, it's always there to some degree, but it's there because I'm preparing for one conversation that I've got happening on Wednesday on the language thing, and to just to
Go ahead
kind
and plug
of
your show. Go ahead and plug your show, Brother Shakara. Go ahead.
okay, I do. Well, I did later, but just to make the
Okay.
point right now, it's more it's not even the deeper level of what you're saying is not only do we think in their language, but we think about our own languages in relation to their language. You see what I'm saying? So even our view of our own languages is defined by them. Yeah. So there's a quote from Fela Kuti where he says that in school they were never allowed to speak Yoruba because Yoruba was not considered a language. It was considered vernacular, colloquial language, yeah, colloquial dialect or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So English was the real language, and you know what I mean, our own language was called vernacular. You know what I'm saying? When we hear about Africa and languages, we hear about thousands of different languages, or one country has hundreds of languages, and the people can't unite because of these languages. You know what I'm saying? The language is not used in the education system, or it's not used. You know what it's on to me? I was watching the Parliament, yeah, in Wales sometime last year or the year before, yeah, and the people them were speaking in Gaelic in the Welsh Parliament.
Well,
yeah, right. You know what I'm saying? In their own language, yeah, they speak, and this is in the United Kingdom of Great Britain, where English, yeah, is the national language, but in their Parliament in Wales, which is a part of the United Kingdom, they speak Gaelic. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And when you go to any, there's no nation on the African continent, you know what I'm saying? Let alone the Caribbean, where an African language is spoken in the government.
That's
Mad.
That's not good.
Mad.
That's not good. You know what you just said when you said the way that we think about our language is in relation to their standard. And I was thinking to myself, that's the way we think about everything that's us.
Everything.
Everything. Even when, I remember my little cousin telling me she's telling her mother, she said she wanted her hair to lay down. Why does her hair, she's like, I want to wear my ponytail out, but I don't want it to be poofy. So she was evaluating her hair in relation to a different type of hair. We everything is, they are the ruler for everything. Oh, you talk messed up because you don't talk like them. You're not dressed like them. You got a job interview, you should be dressed this way. Like it's just really crazy how that's how deep the possession is, that they're the standard. How many of us, I'm gonna just raise my hand, have gone to the doctor and they tell you, oh, you're overweight. By whose standards? Definitely not black people standards, right? Like, I mean, I'm just keeping it real. When I be like, oh, y'all, I'm close to being obese. Black people look at me like I'm crazy. But that's what the doctor says. Standard weight for me, my height is probably like 140 pounds. I haven't seen that since a little bit after high school. You know what I'm saying? Like, but that's just literally everything is at their standard.
Yeah.
And some people are very compliant with that, and they just go along with that. So I would definitely push for people to learn, another language that's a non-colonizing language, I guess. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Like I was so pumped to try to learn Spanish. Now I'm like, man, bump Spanish. Try to learn the Swahili. You know what I'm saying? Like bump Spanish.
That's the thing. I don't know, because I'm trying to learn French at the moment. Yeah. On and off, because so many Africans speak French. You know what I'm saying? At the same time, I'm trying to learn Tree. Yeah. And it's like I had the same battle as you, sis. You know what I mean? I had the same battle as you, thinking, why would I learn the next European language for? And I'm realizing how much of the African continent speaks French, and I'm like, you know what? At this dispensation of time, it's a useful tool. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things where And I suppose that's part of lucid possession, isn't it? In the sense of you're aware that you're possessed. You know, that's the awareness of it. Like you're aware that learning this European language is actually it's actually a product of the possession. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, but your lucidness it gives you the purpose for it, but still the consciousness for it as well, that this is part of the possession. I don't know. So
yeah, big up everybody. Blessings. Just to jump in quickly before I go. Yeah, what's good, Shakara? And I'll let you promote your thing, your thing in a second. I just wanted to jump in quickly and yeah, I like from reading the book, I agree with it. I would like to move on to some cures and possible some how we do exercise some of these demons that people do have in the different ways and different areas and various ways. But one thing I was interested about is the point you brought up, Shakara, in regards to like Afro beats and stuff, and how the Afro beats that takes off is usually when they're wearing a lot more Western clothes and they're showing a lot more quote unquote Western ideas of success. And I wonder like how much how do we remove that particular area in terms of how do we get people to change their idea of what they view as success or what they view as being sleek or high market and high branding. And then also I wonder is there not a possibility that, you know, slick marketing makes anything look good? And it's not necessarily that it was just that they're wearing Western clothing, but that the quality of filming improved and the camera quality could, like, for example, watching the debate at People's Corner is good, but watching it on content over everything usually is like, do you know what I mean? Like the sound quality is up there, the visuals are better. It makes the whole experience a lot more interesting. And so perhaps some of the early Afro beats, I'm not sure because I wasn't watching, but I'm theorizing. Some of the early Afro beats didn't have some of that, because I think sometimes with black businesses we do lack perhaps some of that marketing and some of that final, like putting in those finishing touches in terms of dotting the I, like we always talk about in regards to customer service and stuff like that. And I wonder if there's just some stuff that we need to do more, or whether it's all a matter of people are just never going to buy into black products because of the possession.
Yeah, it's a good one still.
I definitely think the possession is part of it, yeah. Because there's other cultures that have businesses within our community that don't have all these polished touches, especially on the customer service level and how they treat us. But I hear what you're saying. Like, I think one of the issues is support with the, you know, the self-hate, which is part of the possession, you know, because these people that are these communities and people from other communities that are getting to a certain level and a certain level of polish and finished product have had like more investment. So then they are able to more reinvest in what they're doing, even to do with like the banking situation that we're talking about. Like it's been shown that black people are less likely to get bank loans than other communities and such. So we definitely have less access to capital, besides the one that we're spending. But I mean, from people buying from us and from us being entrepreneurial to reinvest in our final product. So sometimes, you know, it's a situation where we need to bear with our people in terms of like, okay, fair enough, your one's a little bit worse than their one, but we're going to keep messing with you. But at the same time, you know, once we've put in enough money and bought enough from you, we expect the standard to raise.
Yeah, I could dig that. I think that you know, we can be a little critical, you know, and that's another manifestation of the possession, you know, is um you know, when I think about it, I really try to block this scene out of my mind. But for those of you all who saw Django, and when the white slave master was sitting there and the two black guys were fighting to the
Monsieur
death.
Monsieur Candy.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That scene of them, like, you know, just the two bucks fighting, and you know, they could tell that they were in pain, and it's like they was encouraged. Like if he didn't finish him, then he would be dead, and he had to like fight till the death right there, just like on the floor, and he wasn't even paying them attention really. He was just like talking over them, like how you can have the TV on and still like have a conversation on your cell phone, and he was just doing that. And to me, that has carried on where it's almost like acceptable or encouraged for us to fight one another and for us to have this like awful opinion of one another, like just crabs in a barrel type of mentality. And I think that if somebody came out with like if a white person made an Afrobeat song right now, oh my God, like oh my God, you know what I'm saying? Like it's the same thing like when Eminem made a song and puts two words and they rhyme together. It was like whoa, this is crazy. You know, it's their ice is always colder than ours.
One thing I've noticed about the music, which is popular, because we were talking about Afrobeats, and this goes back to what was mentioned earlier about somnambulistic possession, where you are basically sleepwalking, you're in a daze. And I believe there are many things which can create that. One of those things is music. And one of those things which I'm going to charge as being guilty is Afrobeats. And I think Afrobeats is definitely a problem. And it's interesting within Afrobeats, what makes it stand out that most people don't notice is that the use of auto-tune. Now, auto-tune is an audio processor. And basically, auto-tune became popular in 1998. There was a singer called Cher. She sang a song called Believe, If You Believe. Now, the producers there used auto-tune as a sound effect to deliberately distort her vocals. And since then, this auto-tune thing has become incredibly popular. And if you listen to most Afrobeats, they always use it and they always distort the singer's voice. So it's not natural, it's unnatural, it's distorted. So within that distortion comes the hypnotism, which puts you into the trance of somnambulistic possession. That's my theory. That's where I'm going with that. That auto-tune is a devilish thing which has been put into that music. If you don't believe me, just listen to all Afrobeats and you will hear that auto-tune being used on the voices of people. And it just distorts the voice and just makes them sound...
Wait, so you're saying that the auto-tune is like white supremacy? And coming out? What?
Well, it was something. Well, put it this way: it wasn't in Afrobeat when Fela was singing. When Fela was singing, you heard his voice. Modern day Afrobeats always has auto-tune and always distorts vocals to give it this melodic sound. If you don't just listen to any Afrobeat song, it always has that auto-tune running behind the scenes, distorting
I just think
the
that
vocals.
that's what's popular now. You got to think. Remember T-Pain and all that kind of stuff. You know, auto-tunes has been like a tool been used. But I hear you, Brother Witness. Don't be trying to messing with people groove with this Afrobeat stuff. I'm just excited. I'm just excited that like African stuff is like popping now. You know what I'm saying? Because like I'm happy about this. Is nobody with me? Am I by myself?
No, you know what? I'm with you, sis. I wasn't putting it on auto-tune like Witness was though. Like I do get what he's saying, innit? And maybe because I've been listening to Afrobeats before it was popping like that. You know what I'm saying? I grew up listening to Fela Kuti before he was a play on Broadway. You know what I'm saying? And them kind of things there. And so when you're in tune with it from its root, you can see where certain things have been watered down. You know what I'm saying? And as well, one of the major things outside of the auto-tune that happens to all of our music, yeah, with the exception of maybe reggae, yeah, and I'm gonna say maybe, very, very maybe, is that the mainstream, because we're so geared towards being successful within their record industry, the music becomes depoliticized. Yeah. So Fela Kuti, there's about maybe 2 songs that Fela Kuti wrote about love and partying. Everything else, yeah, is about revolution. Yeah, everything else, right? You know what I'm saying? Even the ones that were not necessarily forefront kind of hardcore political, like King Sunny Ade. Yeah, like you know, there's a certain cultural relevance that the music has. Is what I'm saying. And so the subject matters are more varied, the stories are more varied. You know what I mean? Because they're about the people and their culture, and kind of things. They're not just about love, party, sex. You know what I'm saying? You know, shake out your bum bum, and you know what I mean? And that's like that, for example, I love that song, innit? Shake out your bum bum. It's a big tune, innit? You know what I'm saying? But I do get how when they get into the music, they rob it of its substance, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? You know.
Yeah, like sometimes it's difficult to really think what progress is, right? Because we go from having not having something to having something in me, and then some people will be like, "That's not enough," and then other people will be like, "Yeah, but you're just ungrateful. I just want some of it, you know? Or I'm happy to have something now, even though it might be in the long term detrimental."
Yeah.
You know, it's like, say for example, if there's a food that is so like grows in Africa or something, yeah, and where you are, there's no one black to buy it from. Do you now reinforce this other community members idea that they can come in and sell products from us to us? Like, do you support that business and get that thing that you want, or do you not support it and let it die?
I'm gonna tell you, brother E. I don't know if I could live life without eating plantain. You know, right? And there's nobody black over here selling plantain. You know,
for real?
And not where I live. It's just, well, they're not white.
Oh,
They're,
you said nobody black.
Yeah, nobody black. Like,
okay, that's regular. That's regular.
Actually, when I lived in Brooklyn, we didn't buy our plantain from black people.
Yeah, that's
the Asian people got it on lock.
Yeah, same in Germany as well. It's Chinese people, or at least
Yeah.
looking people that are selling the plantain, and they selling at extortion rate as well. It's not no three
Nah,
for a pound. It's like €1 each, nearly.
Oh
But
no,
but seriously, why is it in London that if you can't see like a black person selling stuff, like basic stuff?
There's
Let's say
one.
you just want to buy, let's say you just want to go into a newsagent. Or
There's
let's
one.
say there's one.
There are a few here and
Well,
there.
okay, there
Yeah.
might be a couple, but in Northwest London, you gotta go a little bit along Halton High Street, where you'll find them. He's got a grocery store, fruit and veg. Like, I try and go there whenever I can, but it's a bit like it's not that close to me.
Yeah.
There's not that many shops or that many of us. But I think it comes down to some of the ambitions that we have, and I think a lot of the time we want to be rappers, we want to be football players, we want to be, content creators, or making podcasts on YouTube. Myself. And, and things like this, like, and we don't necessarily want to go and work full time in a shop. But, I would put to anybody, like, you could sit down and do a full 8-hour show on YouTube and do it from your shop. Do you know what I mean? Like, and if you really wanted to do that, like, I would say that, like, we do need to diversify a little bit in terms of the stuff we want to do. But I think that's also part of the possession that Amos was talking about. So the way we actually see ourselves, we keep reproducing certain jobs or certain careers because we don't see ourselves as anything else, I think.
My parents went into like owning a newsagent. This was about 20 odd years ago, and I think like they eventually end up selling the business away because it wasn't doing very well, or they didn't have the patience to let it grow at the time. So I just think sometimes you need maybe it's a family support kind of business. You understand what I'm saying when it comes to news agents.
Yeah, I think at least from my experience, I think there's certain industries, there's certain businesses that I think black people tend to be like when they think of, like when you say how they see themselves. So they do see themselves as entertainers. I think they're more quick to open up a bar, a lounge, a restaurant, something like that, than a gas station or a small quick mark to go into and buy a little loaf of bread or something like that. I think that I do see some people owning franchises a little bit more, like getting into franchises. But then again, a lot of those things are community dominated. So there's certain franchises that we can't get into. Like out here, 7-Elevens, in the DC area, a lot of Ethiopians own 7-Elevens.
Okay.
So we do have like that group, but like outside of that one little regional area, I would say it's more of like Indians from like India, like having the whole 7-Eleven market. So you might have Chick-fil-A, or not Chick-fil-A, because that's like white Christian people have that on lockdown. I can't think of one right now. Let's say Burger King. They let black people, into that franchise.
Yeah, but so I heard that these people are all supported by their family members. So the family chip in to help them buy the business, and then when they raise enough capital or when the business thrives, then they'll go and help invest into another family member, kind of thing. So that's how they support one another. But when it comes to like usually from what I see with the black people that try and do it, they always seem to be on their own doing it by themselves. And they seem to be just kind of making ends meet. So it's I think it's that support that they don't get that is kind of off-putting for a lot of people to even start it.
If I could something as a black business, I think that there are quite a few black businesses that are doing a range of things, but I do believe that it's a responsibility, especially for those who are about black betterment, to put it upon themselves to actually look a bit deeper. And there are actually places and platforms where it's made so easy for you. You type in what you want and you'll find it. Builders, architects, website designers, accountants, makeup, cosmetics, music industry, mortgage, lawyers. There's an array. There's not one industry on that website, in fact, where you can't find a black business. So if you want it, you need to actually actively look for it.
Yeah, that's a good point still.
I suppose that's one of the things, isn't it? Like,
and the name of that website, sis?
There's We Buy
Black.
There's when I was talking about food, there's a great one called Ebony Status, where they actually bring in food from black owned businesses, a lot that we know in regards to our seasonings, all the stuff that you just mentioned there, yam, everything else I've ordered from there. I've got a nice little box waiting for me with everything in there, fresh. Didn't go off in
Wait, they send the plantain to you?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I was speaking to the sister who runs that business the other day.
Yeah, so was I. She's brilliant.
Yeah. But and the thing is, not only does she she runs a business, she imports food from other black people, and she uses a black-owned delivery service as well.
That's correct. And there's actually a warehouse as well in North London near Tottenham Hale, and this Jamaican brother's actually got a whole warehouse. You could just walk in there and just literally he's got like 2 or 3 trolleys in there, like, and he's just packed it up with like old school brands, like just old school Caribbean brands. All you have to do is look, and in London it's not really an excuse, because London is literally an underground to each stop to get to where you need to go to. So it's just about actually doing.
You know what I think, with that, it's a bit like grassroots movements as well. Like, say in London, you could be going around thinking that there's like not too much happening and people are not really doing stuff and there's not too many initiatives. But when you start getting tapped in, you get surprised by how many people are actually doing stuff.
Well done, Witness. You just put a link in for Ebony Status that I was just talking about.
Yeah, but
so yeah,
feel free to plug your thing as well.
Yeah. What, do you want me to do it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, just in case people don't stay to the end.
No, okay, no problem. So my business is called Christy Cosmetics. And what I do is I import different brands from around the world that cater to women of colour solely because, as a lot of women who are probably listening will know, is that it's quite difficult to go into any environment in regards to shops and find any cosmetics that's actually catered for your skin tone, or whether you can get any good service or even get any advice in regards to what's good for your tones or anything like that. So the whole concept of Kushti is to turn it upside down, and you are at the forefront. So it's all stacked with darker skin tones. So that's anything from olive Asian down to black. I've recently started working in conjunction with the Jamaican High Commission also. So that reason why I'm really proud of that is that that confirms that any brand that says that they are actually Jamaican black owned businesses, it is certified from them that it is that. So that means that when you're purchasing from someone like my business or a lot of businesses like me, the money is actually bouncing. We're actually doing what people talk, what's getting preached about. Like the money is with me, one, as a black business. Then, for example, I've got someone called Soap Connoisseur. She's a black business. Or Monshare, she's a black business. But Monshare gets her actual shea butters from a village in Ghana. So now the money's bounced 3 times to the women in Ghana that's helping it out and getting it out. So just within your purchase, the money's bounced within our community 3 times.
Beautiful.
So it's about doing little things that are actually helping and actually doing what we're talking about. And it's very easy because with my brand, it's not a pity purchase. We've got brands on there that are well known. We've got brands on there that are just up and coming, but they're all great quality. So yeah, that's my business. It's about doing something that I was frustrated. I was doing a 40 hours week. One weekend I had to go and get cosmetics. I'm living in a very multicultural area and I couldn't believe it was so difficult for me to get my shade. And I realised there and then that I could actually do something about that problem. I've been going for a few years now. I had a shop for 2 years in Wood Green. That did really well. Decided to go online. Since doing that, I've gotten with the Jamaican High Commission. I've got other commissions that want to talk to me this year also. And it's all about just, supporting the brands that are actually out there, supporting these brands that are actually brilliant for our skin. The majority of them only use natural produce, and they actually are providing good results, especially with this. Everyone's conscious about their health recently and things like that. It's only a win-win, and you'll find that with most black businesses. They're doing it for $13.50.
That's right, and I'm looking forward to my makeover when I come to the UK. Sister Kushti is gonna hook me up.
Have you got a date, Melanie?
No, I don't have a date.
Okay.
Thank you, Witness, for dropping my link on there. Appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, Kushti, you also do consultations, right?
I do, yeah, that's right, King. So I do consultations as well. So I do makeovers as well. Consultations normally consist of like a tutorial. So again, because there hasn't constantly been makeup or products that are catered for us, it's quite difficult for women of colour now with an array of products that claim to be for us, or the best way to put it on, the best way to apply it. Some people just want to have a one-to-one with a professional and just build that confidence, ask questions that you've always wondered, best way to apply things, stuff like that. So I offer that as a service. I also offer a makeover. So you go into any events, parties, stuff like that, you can hire me out for that as well. Christy Cosmetics is like normally in all the big black events. So Afro Hair and Beauty, we've gone to that. We were at Shades of Beauty, Curly Treats, we were there. So anything in regards to any big events, you'd most probably find us with a team there as well. So yeah.
Big things. My sister's
I'm on
doing it.
Instagram and Facebook as well, same name, Christy Cosmetics. So please do support, like whatever medium you're on, follow and kind of follow my journey. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
No problem, sis. That's what family's about, We want to see a business grow, and family, as you can hear, she's about what she speaks. She's bringing it back to black. That's what I
Tell
like.
them.
That's right. She's trying to, what you call it? Exercise. No, am I saying the word right? Is it exorcism? Yeah. She's doing the exorcism, her economic exorcism, and keeping that
Absolutely.
circulating that black dollar. That's what it's all about.
That's what he was talking about as well in regards to nation building and respecting our nation as well. Like, obviously, it won't be a shock to a lot of people on the panel that I like that part when he said that, if you're going to come in, you need to contribute something instead of taking away, which has constantly been happening. And I believe that as well, in regards to part of our nation building. Instead of respecting what we bring, like a lot of them are biting the hands that feed them. We lead in so many things. The back time we start patterning it up and start protecting it.
Thanks very much for sharing that with us, Christy. It's good to hear what you're doing with your business, because it kind of ties in very much with what Amos and Wilson was talking about. Because he said, I'm just quoting him, that that the problems we are confronted with today as African people and African people in America flows from our powerlessness or our inappropriate use of power. And he goes that basically we have the possibilities. We just need to reorganize ourselves, reorganize our consciousness and our personality and our culture, and see them as instruments of power and use them as instruments of power to transform our situation. So I guess that would also relate to economics and business, that we would have to take the power back. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in the cosmetics. I think the Black women have done that brilliantly within the last few years. Just using Rihanna as an example, and Sister Melanated just told me of another lady. And we've had
Super Scent.
Right, thank you, sis. These ladies are really changing up the game. If you're only about money, they're doing that. If you're about stereotype, they're doing that. If it's about respect, they're doing that. They're demanding it. So it's about us doing that in different aspects and supporting other people that are doing that.
Yeah, definitely. See, on another, okay, now we come into the end dish of the show, innit? Yeah, like the last part of it anyway. Do we want to pick an area that we think needs an exorcism, and then kind of unpack that and see kind of things that we could do for that? You lot happy to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. I'm going to read off some areas, and then we can just pick one, yeah?
Okay.
All right, so we got music, got fashion, diet, dating, self-hate, debt and who holds that debt, spending, language, names, nationhood, trade and business, employment, or currency. So again, we've got music, fashion, diet, dating, self-hate, debt and who holds that debt, spending, language, names, nationhood, trade, business, employment, currency.
Spending.
Music and cuisine, but I go for music. Get rid of that devilish auto-tuning Afrobeat, which keeps on creating that strange frequency, which is making loads of Nigerians lose their damn minds.
Are you gonna?
My one's self-hate.
Yeah, I like self-hate too.
I'm
That's
with
what I was
Kushti.
thinking.
Because for me, that self-hate one and melanated, for me, that self-hate one affects all the other ones.
Yeah. But the thing, I don't know. Some people call it. I don't know. It's such a subjective phrase, though, isn't it? Self-hate.
All right, let's break it down then.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll go with that. Let's break it down.
So I'm gonna propose that the opposite of self-hate is self-love. And whilst that can be subjective, I think if people make their decisions and choices and act on self-love, a lot of those other things in the list, like music, fashion, if you love yourself and you love your culture, you're going to have an admiration for the fashion of your culture, for the food of your culture. Do you get me? Because that's part of the love you have for it.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, like for me,
that,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go on, sis.
Can you love your?
I was gonna say that part of self-hate, I think would have, or part of developing self-love would have to be I don't know if Brother E mentioned it, but I think it would be part of the education process, right? So the more you are educated about yourself, your history, and the different aspects of your Africanness, the more confident, the more in love with yourself and your people that you become. The more, as Sister Kushti said, like, you know, we were the first to have a 2-story home. You know, I mean, like, to me, I can't help but be a confident black woman. I'm like, we are freaking dope. You upset because you not us. That's how it be because of the knowledge that you get that makes you love yourself more.
I was gonna say, can you actually like, you can love yourselves but still be doing stuff that are detrimental?
By detrimental, you mean like self-harming, not self-harming, like, so it's still causing harm to yourself.
Yeah, in your community.
But then, would you really call that like genuine love?
It's a good question. You know, I'm thinking about what you're saying on the level of diet. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
For example, like, I think most of us, I know I can say that my diet is well below my level of knowledge in terms of what's healthy to eat. You know what I'm saying? Certain times, you know, like I fluctuate in them kind of things there, but like, is it doesn't push me towards, you know, having more consistently healthy eating habits? You know what I'm saying? Or is it just my mind is occupied with other areas of self-love more than this one?
But see, when you're not eating like how you would consider right, yeah, are you actually acknowledging that it's a form of self-hate, or are you dismissing it as something okay that I'm going to work on?
It's something that I'm going to work on.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot to do with perspective. You know, like for me, yeah, love is a verb in it. Yeah, it's about your actions, right? And love is something that that breeds life in it, that makes things grow and allows things to prosper and reach potential. Where I see hate is the opposite of that, and stuff that is a destructive energy that brings destructive results. So I think the self-hate, like it says with the possession, some of it is dormant, or some of it we're not aware of the situations, like in the diet, we're not aware that that's a form of self-hate because it is self-harming, right? But yeah, like I think so there's levels to our self-hate. Like we can have love for self and at the same time still have areas where we're practicing hate.
I agree 100. And I think
when you do eat well, when you eat good, right, you feel like you're doing good to yourself. Like you get that feeling. Like, you know, even my coworkers who don't have necessarily the healthiest diet, because they're like measuring themselves up to me. When they eat a salad, they're like, "Hey, melanated, I had a salad today." They're like, "I did good. I did my body good." You recognize it. I think that when they're having that pizza with the sausage and cheese and pepperoni, you know, they may want to do that, and they want to do that in quiet. They hope I don't walk by their office. You know what I'm saying? They're like, because I'm like, that don't smell like salad. What's going on here? You know.
Yeah.
So they understand. You recognize it, but you may just be like, you just give yourself a pass, or I'm gonna try tomorrow, and you enjoy your pizza. I'm sorry, brother B2. Go ahead.
No, that's cool. What I was just gonna say on the diet thing, yeah, I think it's similar to what he was saying as well. Like, if you're in a position to know that what you're putting into your body is going to have a negative outcome, or is not having a positive outcome, yeah, and you're sort of settling for something that is more convenient but less positive, I don't know, I still feel like that can still fall under self-hate, because we've I can't find the right word, but we've sort of settled for something that's just convenient but not in our best interest. And if we know that, surely that's still self-hate, regardless if the reasons are for convenience or because we've got other engagements or priorities that we're sort of juggling.
I don't know, man. It's like, alright, if we were to apply it to sex, yeah. Again, I put my hand up. I think maybe all of us have probably, you know, partook when we probably shouldn't have. You know what I'm saying? In like, with, you know, wrong individual, wrong circumstance, and it ended in a particularly kind of messy kind of way, if that makes sense. And maybe if we had a better consciousness, we probably would not have engaged him, if that makes sense. That's what I'm saying. So, but is it self-hate? You know what I'm saying? Or is it a lapse in judgment? Or is it, you know what I mean?
So
is
what
it
you're
self-harm?
saying, you have an issue with the word hate, brother, and I understand. You know, it's the not the resurrection, it's the exorcism. It's a little painful, right? When you're talking about these terms, right? But it's in that case, right? If you held yourself to the highest esteem, right? And I'm not just gonna say you, I mean I'm included. My hand is raised, you can't see me. Right? In that moment, if you held yourself to a higher standard, you wouldn't have done that action. This is the reality of it. You would have been like,
that's ready.
Any big booty can't get me. I'm sorry, with your nice shape, you gotta go, honey. Right? Young man with the muscles, you need to move out of here because I have standards. But you know, sometimes you know the judgment and what we deem ourselves worthy in that moment is compromised.
No, definitely, and it's even deeper when you know. Put it this way: there are times when you know that you have been in that consciousness, and you have avoided that thing. You have, you know what I'm saying, said no, or you know what I mean. You have removed yourself from that situation, or you know what I'm saying. And then there are other times where you're not in that consciousness,
right?
You know? So I suppose that the conclusion is that there are times when we're more susceptible to the demon than others, and it's kind of like exorcism is not an event; it's a process, and it's something that we're constantly, or maybe we should accept that exorcism is not possible in our current reality.
No, don't say that.
No, what I mean is what I mean by that in general, yeah, is there were levels in it. So we had the lucid, we had the latent, and we had the I forgot the name.
Somnambulistic possessions.
Somnambulistic,
yeah. And so the lucid is the one where we're aware, yeah, of possession, if that makes sense. And so I suppose that the exorcism is freedom, is actual liberation, which is, if we're putting it in the context of Blueprint for Black Power, is collective. You see what I'm saying? So in a sense, where we're at individually, it's always going to be a reflection of the collective. So whereas I may be at a certain level individually, unless my community is with me on that level, I'm still susceptible to certain levels of the possession.
Okay, I got you.
So it's a thing where maybe we accept the condition that we're in at this present moment in time as, let's say, lucid possession, and so we're actively trying to exercise.
Right, we could be latent, right? We could be latent, but not latent.
No, yeah, we're not. We shouldn't be that.
No, it depends. It depends on the person. Most of us are not latent. We're not experiencing latent possession. Latent possession is when you don't even know you're possessed. I do agree. We do have minority of our people who don't realize that they are experiencing latent possession, and so they're showing violence, self-hate to their own kind. But I think the majority of us are in lucid, as was mentioned, I think, by Shakara. We're aware of it, and we're struggling on a daily basis against this supremacist demonic possession.
I don't know which majority.
I would, you know, I'm not too sure about that, yeah, because like I think a lot of people don't identify with this spirit, right? So they see things as kind of normal. See, for example, how Shakara, you was feeling towards the food, yeah, like feeling that you're not practicing self-hate, but like because you don't feel hateful, but there is, as like, say for example, in the instance, a spirit at that time that pursues its own needs that is actually hateful towards you, but you're not yourself at that time.
Definitely. But once again, I missed the part. Can I just check? Did we decide that Aki and Saltfish was hateful to ourselves?
Aki and Selfish?
Yeah.
I described it earlier, didn't I? I said, according to Amos Wilson, he talked about certain things that we adopt as our culture, but are in fact reactionary to the oppressive nature of the supremacist culture. So we created a culture in reaction to our supremacy, but it's not really our culture, but it's just something we created, a reactionary culture.
100%.
No, but he's talking about so being selfish is basically demonstrating, you know, self-hate, because you being selfish towards your community, which is a reflection of you.
No, sis, why I said Aki and Saltfish? Aki and Saltfish.
Oh, Aki and Saltfish is self-hate. How was that self-hate?
It's technically, you know, along, you know, curry goat and all those Caribbean foods.
No,
left me Aki alone.
This was why I didn't want to mention, when I first mentioned it, I didn't want to mention certain countries with cuisine because I knew people would be very patriotic about it.
Isn't that a fruit? Isn't Aki a fruit?
Yeah, Aki's a. Can I was mentioned first of all, that historically speaking, Aki is apparently one of the fruits that we brought over from Ghana, from the West Coast. Is what I'm saying. Now, having said that, the swordfish thing, because the swordfish doesn't actually come from any, like, Jamaica's national dish is Aki and swordfish don't come from Jamaica. You know what I'm saying? So evidently, that is something that's being imported from somewhere else. At the same time, I do think that we have to be careful, because in response to oppression, you have a culture of reaction, but you also have a culture of resistance, and they're not always the same thing. So I'm saying, I would argue that Rastafari, for example, is a culture of resistance for the most part. Yeah, there are some reactionary elements within it, but I'd argue for the most part, it's a culture of resistance. You know what I'm saying? I would argue that many of our music art forms begin as a culture of resistance, and then they may become reactionary with, you know what I'm saying, as the you know, the oppressive culture begins to co-opt it more. But I do feel that we have to recognize that we have a liberation orientated culture, because we always resisted oppression. And I think a lot of the exorcism is going to be reliant upon us kind of focusing on those elements and developing that culture of resistance.
You know, I wanted to also contribute to Brother Scattered's question as far as Brother E, when he was talking about the solutions, right, or part of the exorcism. I was particular to pertaining to self-hate, changing the imagery, right? I think changing the imagery to an African-centered sort of imagery where there's a higher level of acceptance of ourselves and not feeling a need to conform to what has become the dominant culture is vital. I think even just us on this platform and the way in which we're having dialogue and the way in which we're challenging each other's thoughts, and this is contrary to the image that Black people can't get along, Black people can't they can't express themselves and articulate a point, they can't stay on a topic, they're ignorant, they're this, all of these things. This right here, just one show, contributes to positive imagery of who we are. Magazines and sitcoms on television and positive shows on YouTube and positive imagery on Instagram and all those things, can chip away at this collective self-hate that we have, that we display as a people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I also think, we need to get more comfortable with each other. Like, we need to be more in each other's company and stuff like that, with like people that we don't know, and meeting other cultures. Because I also think, like in the Black community, there's a lot of different cultures, right? And a lot of us don't, like, say for example, one of my friends now, he's from Eritrea, and I met him in college, right? And I never heard of Eritrea until I met him.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? He's like, he's from Eritrea, and I'm like, where? He's like, Eritrea, and I'm like, where's that, bro? Like, and he's like, he's breaking it down to me. But up until that point, I still didn't meet someone else from Eritrea that wasn't connected to him for a couple of years.
Boy.
And I live in London. I was in London all them years. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
So, like, I definitely think, you know, as parents, yeah, parents should be looking to bring our children around other people from the community that we might not necessarily know, and we should try and organize these kind of things. So, yeah, we grow up with a much more familiarity with each other, and much less suspicion.
True.
You know, because I think, you know, part of the self-hate is that, you know, a lot of suspicion has been erased around us, and a lot of false narratives have been created to perpetuate that suspicion. And it's like, you know, if a lot of times, you know, black brothers might pass each other on the street, but when they see each other, there's a tension for a moment when they're going past, and it's like, it's so unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe going out and actually like visiting some countries as well, that could help to change people's views on certain parts of the different cultures amongst our black community. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So even people like that are from the Caribbean that haven't been to Africa, you know, when they go to Africa, sometimes it can change their perspective, and vice versa. You know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Just I think just those things can definitely you know, contribute to a more positive self-image. And when I say self-image, I'm more so speaking of like community image. How you know, you see your community. You know, if you see your community as making strides, making attempts, you see beauty in the variety that we are. You know, beauty in the varying shades, the varying expressions of color and dress, style and dress. You know, modesty and seductiveness, or you know, athleticism, and you know, academic pursuits. Like we're just such a colorful people, and when you can appreciate that really can improve, you know, our self-love collectively, I guess.
Yes, I agree with that. I just wanted to mention something that I saw interesting in the chat. Peace to Arthur Clark. Pleasure that you're here watching us. He mentioned some interesting points, which I think most of us will agree with. Piggybacking off what Melanated was saying, there's something interesting I saw Arthur Clark say. He says, finding the genius in your African DNA is the key to self-love. I love the sound of that. I've been working really hard since I read it to try and fully understand the meaning of that sentence. Finding the genius in your African DNA is the key to self-love. Another thing Arthur Clarke left, which I think most of us will agree, we have to control the narrative about our humanity. We can't allow non-Black people to tell our story or describe our journey. I would agree with that, absolutely. The other thing I think we should be aware of is that as Black people, let's say within the UK, we should be aware of all Black people in our community. And what I mean is, we should be aware of, if I look at it from a class system, Black people who are part of the underclass, the working class, the middle class, the upper middle class, and even to my astonishment, I was watching the House of Lords, and there are a few Black people in there who are part of the upper class. So we've got Black people in all specters of our UK community. But I feel that when we talk about nation building and nationhood and looking at ourselves as a nation, we tend to forget a whole group of other Black people, and we just concentrate on a particular demographic, which I think is divisive, and it's not going to help us be successful.
100. Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe that's because people are trying to, just point out that we are at the bottom, so they totally ignore that just to put their point across. I've seen that quite a few times.
Brother B2 or Brother E, have you posted the link for the join the CC for the after chat?
I'll get onto that right now.
Okay. Because it's about that time, Huh?
I was just gonna say, to piggyback on what I'd say about self-love, is probably close to what I think it was Arthur Clarke said. What I was actually speaking to Reggie about earlier is just starting with self and maybe finding something about your culture historically. So it's more personal to you. It'll spark your interest to actually find out about where you're from and what you've brought to society or the world. And then hopefully from then it will just spark your curiosity to keep digging and find out more about us more as a community and wider and so on.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Some good insight right there. Well, family,
But we still gonna carry on a little bit longer, innit? Because we started a little bit late.
Well, I want the family to like and subscribe right now. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit that notification button so that way you get the notification when CC is live, because we plan on doing more shows and we want you to be in the building on time. So, what was some of the other areas that we could do an exorcism? Maybe we
got fashion, we got dating, we got spending, we got nationhood, employment.
Dating is going to be very controversial.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough time to do dating today.
No, it's very simple, you know.
I know. It's not. It's simple, but it's for some people it's complicated.
Yeah, it's like people who like ackee and saltfish, trying to get them to stop eating. It ain't gonna work.
That was a horrible witness.
Oh man!
Listen,
I'm about to go to the Caribbean restaurant right
now.
Yeah.
You get me? Where I deal with? Left
to all the people listening, it's a joke. I don't have a problem with ackee and saltfish. So.
But yeah,
ackee and callaloo, that's better. Get some veggies. Yeah.
See on the self-hate thing, yeah. I was thinking, is boycotting a tool of self-love?
Yeah.
I think so. You should boycott things that are like against you. Like I boycott Black Friday every year. Like not giving them my money.
I'm gonna say it depends. Yeah. I got a sister called Iola. She is she's the partner of a brother called Dina Kai. Really, some of you might have heard of him. Of them, should I say? And she had a talk with another sister the other day, and they used this terminology called not it wasn't anger boycotting, but it was something along them lines, yeah. And they were talking about the principle of black love in relation to business, and the whole point of what they were saying. Well, I didn't listen to the whole show, but I got the sentiment because it's something that I thought about. But the terminology that she used was so perfect. I'm vexed I can't remember it right now. But the idea was that we shouldn't boycott. The source from which we're boycotting shouldn't be out of anger for how we're being disrespected by these brands. Like, every time somebody disrespects us, H&M, Gucci, and whoever else has done it over the last few years, we get all in a frenzy and we boycott them. But it should be out of, it should be proactive, basically. It should be out of a sense of, we are proactively enacting this agenda for our own self-benefit rather than because we're upset with this company right now. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that when we're doing it out of anger for a company, it may not be self-love because we're doing it out of because we feel like we've been rejected by the company more than because we want to do for ourselves.
Yeah, that one I can take it. So.
Yeah, I can understand that. But
So the next one you lot want to unpack? You wanna just touch on spending real quick?
Spending. That's a good one.
Well, the spending's an easy one. I mean, when Kushti was talking earlier, it also goes into spending into black businesses. And somebody was talking, so basically you're going to have to locate the black businesses and spend for them. And we put the links in the chat, which we'll add later on somewhere else on the page. So it's a case of using that to locate black businesses and spending there. Thus, we're achieving economic power, I guess.
Yeah, so there's Buy Black, which is UK and British, and there's another one called that we got yellow pages. It's called Black Pages.
Yeah.
So if you want it a bit closer to home for those who are in the UK.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there's another like angle to it. I mean, not just in the sense of how we support our businesses or stuff like that. I mean, in terms of like when black people get paid, what do we do with our wages? Do we use it to invest back home? Do we use it on the right kind of thing to propel ourselves, or are we just spending our money to survive? Is that that seems to be a common theme. You understand? We're not really seeing much product from basically the way our community is basically increasing in wealth. Over the last, I'll say 20 years, the amount of money in the black community has probably increased in terms of what we're earning. But still our countries are not really increasing, which shows that we're not really spending the money as we should be. Is everyone with me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that does tell you something about the way we're actually utilizing our money and the sense of wealth. We've got much more millionaires than we ever had in the black community now, and we've got much more middle class people in our community than we probably ever had. But still, we've got so many issues that need economic addressing.
There's a thing that we've spoken about at our the Speakers Corner called co-unity. It's an idea from Raven. And we definitely need to have some more conversation around it. But it's the whole idea is that we just develop this program whereby on a week, like in the summer, we pick certain businesses for a day that we're just gonna go there and spend money in. And the whole point of it is one, it circulates money in the community, but it also, by promoting the idea, it helps to advertise the businesses and generate awareness of the existence of these businesses. So yeah, it's just something putting out there, but
yeah, there's another company doing that, which is really good. So we need more people doing stuff. Pardon?
Say that again, sis?
I said there's another company that's doing something on that lines as well. So it's brilliant that more people do that.
Yeah.
Does anybody here feel that as a black community we spend responsibly?
Hell no.
No. Would you say that we're one of the worst in terms of ethnicities in the way that we spend our money?
No, I don't know. You'd have to compare how much we get compared to others.
But I would think it's another form of self-hate, right? Or it's multiple things in it. But a lot of other communities, like if you're spending within your own community, it's not as detrimental, in it. It's like, because at the end of the day, the standard within the community is still going to be to a certain standard. Where if everybody's spending with other communities, then the other communities are going to get that benefit from other people's lavishness.
Yeah. Because it's a stereotype, you know what I'm saying? Like, basically, like we would spend like hundreds of pounds on a pair of trainers, but yet our living conditions are in desperate need of improving, but we're willing to spend so much money on certain elements of clothing. You get what I'm saying?
I think that's more economic knowledge, though. I mean, if you know where to put your money where it'd bring you back a better return, you'd probably spend it in that way. But if you've never been with money and you've got a bunch of money, you haven't suddenly gained a whole bunch of knowledge in regards to finance. You're still that person physically in your head. And in our community, a lot of that is when they're young, they get that kind of money overnight. And it's like, they're still that person. It's just that their bank account is just increased. So that person can now afford all of those shoes they used to walk past and wish that they could get. So impulsive first initial reaction is to go and buy it. What should have happened is that he should have had someone who was literally on his side, an advisor. You know, he should have gone through We Buy Black, got himself an advisor, a black advisor, and started to tell him how to invest it, what else you could do. This portion, this 10%, go wild with it. But with this 90%, maybe you could have done this, that, and the other. So yeah, I believe that happens, but I do believe there's a reason for it. I don't believe that like we're just ignorant and we get money, we spend it off.
Right. And I think, you know, we all agree that the possession does occur, right? So what you're speaking about is a person who's possessed, right? They have a mind that is to meet the desires or the demands of the host, of the oppressor, right? So you're speaking of someone who is materialistic and they are buying sneakers to generate wealth for another community. On board with everything that we've been a person of a where that had the, and I keep calling it resurrection. Somebody please tell me what the thing is called.
Exorcism.
Exorcism. Yes, thank you. The exorcism. You know, now that person, they're now seeking out where to put their black dollars. They have a mindset to operate in that way. So that's the end game. That's the goal. That's where we're a community to, you know, and just communicating this and educating is just one way to go about achieving that goal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I think it's time to wrap it up now, yeah. But next
Reggie.
week's show. So Reggie got something to say?
No, I was gonna bring up a controversial one, but like how much do African Caribbean women spend on their hair each month?
Let's not.
All right, cool. So next week's show.
We're gonna pretend we didn't hear.
Next week's show
is in.
Don't let me quote Betty for you, Reggie. Don't let me quote what Betty says.
Do you know what? Can I just say something quickly?
Yeah, go.
Very quickly, yeah, because I thought of it when Witness said what he said last, and I was looking at that. It's a quote from Malcolm X, yeah.
Yeah, so Reggie, Mike, yeah.
His speeches in 1954 in June, yeah, founding rally of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, and it relates to what Witness was saying before. And Malcolm X says, when I was in Ghana, I was speaking with, I think his name is Nana Nketiah. He had a fireplace in Accra. He had gone to Oxford, and one of the things that he said impressed me to no end. He said that as an African, his concept of freedom is a situation or a condition in which, as an African, he feels completely free to give vent to his own likes and dislikes, and thereby his own African personality. Not a condition in which he is copying some European cultural pattern or some European cultural standard, but an atmosphere of complete freedom where he has the right, the leeway to bring out of himself all of that dormant, hidden talent that has been there for so long. That's what I related to what Witness was saying before, so I wanted to share it.
Wow, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Hi there, family. So next week's show will be entitled Time to Clean House, and we'll unpackage the exorcism a bit more, and also the things, you know, that we need to remove from the community in order to have a clean house.
Whoa, remove stuff from the community, like sweeping up the cockroaches, sweeping them away.
You know,
family, please excuse Witness. Please excuse Witness, family. But it's important to clean the house. You know, like you cannot open your door and let people in, right? Be hospitable, you know, we can't do business and do trade and do all this stuff with other communities when our community still needs to be cleaned up. When our home, you know, things are out of place and out of order, and some things are broken, you know. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for next week, family. Hope you're excited for next week. If you love the show, I hope you hit that like button. And yeah, thanks for passing through to Constructive Convos, where the conversation stays black. It's always black. Blackity black, black, black.
Black, 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 black.
All right, peace, family.